Welcome to this special edition of I24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek, coming to you from Nahal Oz as we mark 2 years since the October 7th Hamas massacre. This very kibbutz community was one of the hardest hit on that dark Saturday. And as we pre-record this 2-year special, the intense fighting is happening just a few kilometers behind us here in Gaza City. All as intense talks continue for a ceasefire in Gaza. Clearly, the October 7th attacks, they still define Israel's security, diplomacy, and daily life. All topics we're going to be discussing over the next hour. And to discuss it all with me, I'm joined by three familiar faces to our I24 News viewers. Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, as well as the former Israeli deputy foreign minister. Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus, the former international spokesman for the IDF, as well as a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, as well as our I24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osirian. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this very important day as we discuss all of these very important topics. But Danny, I want to begin with you. A broad question as we begin this conversation, because 2 years later, when you look back at October 7th, what do you think has changed most for Israel? Is it security, diplomacy, or Israel's very sense of identity?
I would say, Nicole, all of the above. The 7th of October massacre was the darkest day for the Jewish people from the Holocaust, 85 years ago. It's certainly the darkest day for Israel since its reestablishment in 1948. We were caught unprepared, unawares, so in many ways it was a part of negligence, arrogance, and this was just a reminder of landing back in reality, the reality of the Middle East, where if you cannot defend yourself, you're done for, you're massacred. And since then, Israel has bounced back in a big way. So what happened as a local battle here, where we are in Nahal Oz and the near Gaza, has really changed the Middle East in many ways, and very fundamentally. One of the objectives of the Hamas, besides killing Jews, was that to scuttle the Abraham Accords. They survived, and not only that, now the Iranian Shia axis is pretty much down, and so from a geopolitical point of view, Israel is much better now. But of course, we still grieve for all the losses.
Certainly, and you raise a very interesting question, Danny, that I would like you to answer, Jonathan, because 2 years later, Israelis are still asking, how did the country's most sophisticated intelligence system, most sophisticated defense system right here in these kibbutz communities, how did they miss something as major as October 7th? Is that a question we have an answer to 2 years later?
Yeah, I think Israelis are still waiting. Israelis and Jews around the world, parents of lone soldiers, etc., they're still waiting for that official inquiry into really bringing the high level as well as the tactical level of really how did it happen and how could we have failed so badly. And I think we failed, we, the IDF and the entire security establishment, failed in the most spectacular and horrible way. According to my understanding, based on what I've heard, read, interviewed, and the information that I have access to, I would put it at a mix of, first and foremost, convincing ourselves that we have a good understanding and hold of our enemy. I think we rationalized their behavior and we underestimated their capabilities. We completely misunderstood their strategic intentions, and we thought that if we could keep them on track of economic development and stabilizing the Gaza Strip, that would pacify them and that would cause them to relent on their jihadi creed. They didn't. And Hamas never relented on their jihadi creed, and they haven't changed their strategic objective, which is to annihilate the state of Israel. And I think we told ourselves stories that were simply untrue, but they fit a certain Western narrative, a two-state solution, peaceful coexistence, really a basic misunderstanding of the neighborhood we live in. And that led to us downplaying what the military saw, what the intelligence, the different red flags that were raised, and explaining away, wrongfully, that what we're seeing isn't really what's happening. And last thing, to put the stark contrast on that, I would say that if we would have addressed the threat emanating from Gaza with half the seriousness and vigilance that we addressed the threat coming from Hezbollah and the Iranians, I don't think that October 7 would have happened as severely as it did, or at all. I'm happy that today the biggest and most lethal enemy we had on our borders, Hezbollah, is downsized, still on its knees, and in strategic trouble. And that's a good thing. That's a good outcome of October 7. But I'm, of course, very sad to be in this place and to remember everything that happened here, just a few hundred yards away at Nahal Oz and all of the other communities.
So clearly there are still a lot of looming questions at play, a big one being for these residents, when and how they're going to finally start to feel safe here in the south. Danny, beyond a ceasefire, as we still hear what's happening in Gaza behind us, what has to happen to the south for these residents to actually feel safe, those who have returned and those who haven't?
First of all, it's amazing that most of them have returned. By the way, there is a big line of volunteers who would like to come and resettle here and bring their, build their homes here and their family. It shows, I think, the Israeli resilience, or if I can quote what Golda Meir said, we are here and we are fighting as we are because there is no elsewhere for us to go. So this is really the epitome of the Israeli, I would say, spirit. And I would say for a good outcome out of this misery of the 7th of October, we should see a totally new and reformed Gaza, where Hamas is nowhere to be seen over there, never to come back. We should see the dismantlement of all the tunnels, the demilitarization with, the gathering of all the weapon, whatever is remain there, and to de-radicalize Gaza. And for that, I think we will need a real 5, 10, even 20-year plan. Because it's not going to be overnight, and I'm afraid that what we have seen may impact in the wrong way generations of Palestinians to come. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to make sure that any political outcome will not give, not the Palestinians, certainly not to Hamas, any rewards.
This is what's so difficult for many of our viewers to understand, Jonathan, this ideology that is inside Gaza, this radical Islamist Hamas ideology 2 years later. Is it any less prevalent, or what does the future hold?
Yeah, I think when Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia started to try to reform his country, he assessed the situation and he started to reform two main systems because he understood that they were the fertile breeding ground for extremism, radical Islamist extremism. And if he doesn't do change there, then there won't be long-term sustainable change in his country. Those two systems were the education system and the mosques. The same applies in Gaza. Gaza has been a fertile breeding ground for jihadi Islamism for generations. The schools, or the places where children are indoctrinated in Gaza, run by UNRWA, are places that really are an assembly line for the next generation of terrorists. So when we speak about ideology and when we speak about the future, and I very much agree with Ambassador Ayalon, all of what he says is true, and I would add to that to say it very clearly. UNRWA must be dissolved and must be forced out of Gaza, and not a day too soon. No meaningful long-term change will happen in Gaza without UNRWA being disbanded and Palestinians there being told that you are no longer refugees, you are people, you are not victims, you have the ability to shape your own future, and you are not to be waiting on the handout from other people. You own your destiny and you're responsible for it, and you will be held accountable for your actions.
Ariel, there's still no answer on the day after, and that's what's so difficult also when we talk about what needs to happen. If Hamas is destroyed, what replaces it? Can Israel afford another power vacuum in the Gaza Strip?
Right, Nicole. So, as you say, we're 2 years into this war, and there's still no answer. But this question was there since day one. And we've seen complete failure on the part of the Israeli government putting forth a coherent plan that outlines Israel's legitimate security strategic demands moving forward with obviously consultations with its partners. What we are seeing right now, I think the most clear vision for the future is what U.S. President Trump has put forth on the table, what's dubbed the 21-point plan. But ultimately, the main question is there is no such thing as a political vacuum inside the Gaza Strip. If you want to get rid of the genocidal jihadist governance of Hamas, you have to put in some alternative. And Israel has not achieved at finding such alternative. But in the meantime, we have seen that on the global stage, led by regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they are priming the Palestinian Authority. And so whether Israel wants to or not, in this 21-point plan, in one way or another, under one name or another, the Palestinian Authority is being reintroduced to the Gaza Strip. There are currently 10,000 security officers who are being trained in Egypt to assume control on the ground as the policing force, where this 21-point plan stipulates that there will also be international Arab peacekeeping force that will be on the borders. That is, according to what these Arab countries the leaders met with Trump on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, this is what they want to see. So it kind of seems that whether Israel wants to or not, the entire global community that is pushing for this day after vision in Gaza is setting its sights and grooming the Palestinian Authority to assume its control. Now, this is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has said since day one. No Abbas, that's Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, and no Hamas. But the reality on the ground has proven that there is no third element to that, no matter how hard Israel has tried, and it appears that it's the international community that is pushing forward the Palestinian Authority, and it's going to be up to Israel to decide whether it completely marks off this entire proposal or if it swallows this frog.
And these security implications, they don't stop just at Israel's border. October 7th, it redrew the entire map of the Middle East, reshaping alliances, rivalries, and even Israel's place in the region. I want to come back to our Middle East correspondent, Ariel, because, Ariel, how do you answer the question, how has October 7th reshaped Israel's place in the region? It's so far beyond just Gaza and Lebanon. We're talking about an entirely different map of the Middle East.
Nicole, what highlights the strategic achievements that Israel has gained over these past 2 years has been described here. I think what first needs to be understood is just this stemmed from the worst failure in Israel's security history. And so from the lowest of the lows, Israel has been able to take this failure and turn it into strategic opportunities, starting from the northern border. Nasrallah is gone. There's a new political reality in Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu even inviting the Lebanese leadership to engage in direct peace talks with Israel. Just not 2 years ago, 1 year ago, that would have been unthinkable. Let's move on to Syria, a completely new government over there, abandoning the Iranian axis to an extent where Iran's top security official cannot even fly over Syrian airspace when he wants to go to Lebanon. Also, unthinkable. There's even a regional joke that it's the Syrians who hate the Iranians most in the region, even more than Israel. And if we go to the Houthis in Yemen, yes, I think Israel, this is one of the challenges that remain for the long term, but we are seeing a rough consolidation of an international coalition. It has not yet been formed, but we are already hearing the internationally recognized government of Yemen calling for this international coalition to go after the Houthis. We saw the Americans go after the Houthis. Years back, we saw Gulf countries go after the Houthis. Israel is currently the only country that is going after this international global threat. But with this call from the internationally recognized government in Yemen for this coalition, we are hearing new voices that we didn't hear until now. In Iraq, the pro-Iranian militias, they're on their back feet and they're trying to preserve whatever influence they have in Iraq. And I think the ultimate challenge, if we put aside the ongoing challenges with the Palestinian arena, that there's, I think, the most complex of all the seven fronts is the Palestinian arena with Iran. No more a shadow war between Israel and Iran. This has become the main stage. I fear that the exchange of blows that occurred not just on the 12-day war, but also before that, this is something that we should expect to continue moving forward. But ultimately, this appears to be the end game in this regional conflict. Israel going after the head of the octopus, the proxies effectively dismantled with only one proxy ongoing, that is the Houthis. But as I described, they are being perceived as a global threat, even if not yet treated as such. And so we really see across the board a complete shift in the reality in the Middle East, and this is attributed a lot to Israel's tactical gains that have brought upon a strategic shift, going from the lowest of the lows to currently establishing Israel as a prominent regional power.
Israel is a prominent regional power. It has respect in the Middle East now. Danny, but has it lost that respect in the West at the cost of this respect in the East?
Well, there's certainly a trade-off. Until the 7th of October, there were three major powers in the region. None of them is Arab. Turkey, Iran, and Israel. After the 7th, 2 years after the 7th of October, Israel has emerged as the first and the most powerful one. And Iran is very much degraded, and Turkey, I think, is also pretty much at bay. And at the same time, unfortunately, for political reasons, cowardness, and I think very, very wrong other reasons, outrageously many countries, especially our European friends, have recognized a Palestinian state as not on the merit. Palestinians right now do not deserve a state after the 7th of October, but they did it as a punishment to Israel, because Israel fell prey to a brilliant, unfortunately, campaign of starvation and genocide by the Hamas and all their accomplices. But we have to be very, very, very true and very forceful to say, if there was a genocide, it was perpetrated by Hamas. Any war crimes, Hamas has many war crimes. They are the ones who killed Israeli civilians, and also they use their civilians as human shields. Unfortunately, we were not able to persuade most of the world about it, except the United States of America.
2 years later, has the rest of the world forgotten about October 7th? Jonathan, is Israel safer 2 years later, or is Israel just more alert and the rest of the world forgetting those dangers that still lurk beyond?
Yeah, following up on what Ariel said and Ambassador Ayalon, I think militarily speaking, regionally, we're at a much better place, and we're stronger, we're perceived as tougher, more resolute, and I think we cast a longer shadow of deterrence around us, which is very important, and that can be a factor that will help stability, prosperity, maybe peacemaking, maybe making good things with the Syrians or with the Saudis. It's always good to have your enemies and potential enemies and adversaries believe that you are strong, battle ready, and that they shouldn't by any chance think about attacking you. Strategically, however, I think we are in a far worse position than we were before October 7, and we have in some way we've traded regional standing for international standing. And I think that needs to be the focus of the Israeli government. That needs to be front and center of government spending, of priorities, personnel and tasks. It is to fight that diplomatic battle of hearts and minds, lawfare, which is a tremendous front that we are going to, that Israelis, Israeli companies, universities, private citizens, former military, everybody are going to be fighting there.
We will certainly have to wait and see. A lot of questions remain for the future, but you three give us some good perspective on what has happened in the past. Ariel Osran, Danny Ayalon, and Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus, thank you for being with us.